right, welcome back to another exciting episode of Black Guys on White Movies. We are here, and I am your host, Aaron Covington.
I'm your co-host, Aman Adumer.
And guest co-host, Bernard Harris.
And this week we're doing the movie Twilight. It's just called Twilight. The Twilight? No, just Twilight. The first one is just Twilight.
And the series is the Twilight series. So
Twilight Saga.
Oh, my bad. Saga.
Each movie after is titled The Twilight Saga, semicolon, then the title, New Moon, Eclipse, Breaking Dawn, part 1 and 2.
Right.
But today we're just doing Twilight. A little housekeeping before we get started. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share. I can't, I'm not saying everybody has to share. Everybody has their curated feeds, and you don't have to call each family member one by one, hey, check out this podcast. But
no,
you don't have to post.
You 100% do.
This is reverse psychology.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to hit him with reverse psychology.
Gotcha. My bad. I fucked it.
But then also, but if you like it, if you subscribe on Apple, on Spotify, I think we're also on Google. Those things help a lot to grow our audience. I was thinking about having some kind of message board or something, or I don't really know. I'm not really that familiar with Discord, but something where people could gather and talk. But we need more viewers. We need more listeners. Viewers too, because I post these on YouTube also. So you can see us live on my YouTube channel. Just Google search engine the title of the podcast, Black Guys on White Movies, or if you find me on social media, I'm at BearCov, BearCov. Click on that link, and it links to pretty much everything I'm working on now, my YouTube page and my short film and this podcast and other things. You can follow Bernard on Instagram
at Bernard EPH.
Bernard EPH. Aman is not on social media, but you can catch him if you're in Los Angeles.
Yes, you can
at
catch
the UCB
me.
Theater.
Yeah. Yep. Performing there with my team Leroy, another group, Benetton, and every once in a while on ASCAT.
Performing long form improv generally. It's really funny. These are really funny teams. If you know, you know. If not, get plugged in. What are you doing?
Right.
Plug in.
Plug in. Get to know. Jump in.
So that's that. Oh, also, we have an Instagram page now. Just Instagram. You can go to mine. I have a link to it. Or just search Black Guys on White Movies or the hashtag Black Guys on White Movies podcast. Should take you right to our page where I post clips from episodes, and we can also talk in those comment sections. And that'll be continually rolling out because if you're a listener, we kind of do seasons and then we take time off. So I'll continue to post clips when we're on hiatus in between seasons. That being said, back to it. What is the Black movie of the week? I am not sure.
That's
not sure.
That's a great question.
Because there aren't really... We talked about some of the vampire movies last week. We just mentioned them, and one of them could be, the movie, the Black movie of the week this week, but I was like, none of them are really young adult movies. They don't fit. They're not like this movie.
Right.
Other than they have vampires. And really, if you watch this first one, this Twilight, you might be like, it had vampires? It might be a question you have, because there was vampire stuff, but this is more of a young adult, like, romance novella. So what I want to pick, and I'm open to if anything comes to you guys' mind or anything, but I wanted to see romance in an unusual setting. So this is kind of a stretch in a way, but it also in that way makes sense. So I chose Love and Basketball as the Black movie of the week.
Oh, yeah.
Romance on the basketball court. And it was a lifelong romance. You know, they knew each other as kids and were always like trying to be together. They were together and apart. Their families were problems, similar to some of the things in this movie and that this movie hints at for the whole series, which I haven't engaged in, I haven't read yet. And we'll talk about that some. So I went with Love and Basketball. Any thoughts about a Black movie pick, or maybe a Black vampire movie that we haven't mentioned that we might want to mention?
I mean, you go Black vampire, immediately think Blade. And I just don't know if this would be a good double feature, because Blade would, if you come for the vampire, you go with Blade. If you're looking for the romance, you're going to fall for Twilight.
For sure.
And we've mentioned Blade a few times, so that's why I didn't want to just do Blade. We did, we mentioned it last week, even though it wasn't the Black movie.
True. I loved Love and Basketball. That's a great choice.
Yeah, Blade's really interesting too. We kind of talked about this, I think, off mic, but like, it's kind of a Black vampire movie, right? Because it's Wesley, the female lead is Nabushi Wright. You know what I mean? So it has two major Black actors, or at least major roles with Black actors, and like Wesley's company co-produced it. So you want to throw it in there. It feels very. I feel like that movie feels Blacker than it is. Anyways, that's.
we all claim it. We all claim it as a Black.
We claim sure, that's our
movie. For sure.
There is a made-for-TV movie called Black as Night.
Black as Night.
It's the 6th installment in the Welcome to Blumhouse series of films. It's about a teen girl who battles vampires and insecurities in a supernatural teen drama. So this is like something nobody's really heard of on a major scale.
Oh, that's a shame.
Keith David was in it.
Oh man.
The girl is Asha Cooper. Yeah, so I have to look that up and see what that's about. Black as Night, a Blumhouse.
Yeah.
Maybe made for TV movie.
I hope that some Black people are involved in making that, and I hope that the title is like a joke as well, because it feels like a crack, like a middle school crack against somebody's like a colorist crack.
Oh, what's crazy is I think I know the director. I think she went to USC when I was there.
Oh, dope.
Marie Go. I don't know if I think they always called her Mari Go. Yeah, and I've never heard of this. Black as Night.
So while you're talking about that, while you're looking at that, I want to thank you for bringing that up, because it reminded me of something I thought about while watching Interview and thinking of a Black movie. So first and foremost, I would say if I had a unorthodox pick for Black movie of the week, I thought of ATL, because it's a high school movie. And it's from around the same time. It's like 2006. So I thought about ATL. But as far as something that's Black vampires, there's a short. It's a short. Anybody can look it up and watch it for free online. I think that's how I saw it for sure a year or so ago. And I just looked it up to make sure it's still out there. So it's called Suicide by Sunlight. Suicide by Sunlight. It's a short film. If I remember, I think it's less than 15 minutes. But yeah, Black vampire. She's a day walker. Her melanin protects her. So there's some interaction with vampirism and melanin in it. And I believe she's a nurse at a hospital or something. That's the full extent that I remember. But I remember being very impressed by it when I saw it maybe 2 years ago or something like that.
Say that name one more time.
Suicide by Sunlight.
Suicide by Sunlight. Fitting title for a vampire movie.
Mm-hmm.
So the Black as Night, real quick, I'll wrap this up. Blumhouse did a series of an anthological horror series on Amazon. They did 8 movies, 8 movies by different directors. I think definitely it looks like diversity was a big part of this. And it's just a bunch of different horror movies. It looks like you can watch them all on Amazon. So shout out. Maybe that's something worth doing. It's officially October.
It's officially October.
Get your spooky movie on. It's time.
It's time for it.
I would say, as far as that, I have not seen all of those Amazon movies, but I've definitely seen two of them. Don't remember the names right now, but one stars a black actor, black man,
Black Box.
Black Box. So I've seen Black Box. I enjoyed it as far as a horror movie goes, so I would recommend it. And then the Indian American one, which I don't.
Evil Eye.
Evil Eye. I really enjoyed that film. I thought it wasn't perfect, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting.
But the always wonderful Sarita Chowdhury.
Yes.
Yeah. She's been in the Sex and the City reboot and like that, and of course the classic Mississippi Masala. Let's go.
I was gonna say Mississippi Masala for sure.
Now, 10 minutes in, we're getting to Twilight. We're gonna have a lot to talk about. We'll touch on a little bit on Stephanie Meyers, the writer of the book series, and we'll talk about franchising. This is what this movie was really like, so clear to me, and of the era that it came out. But first, this individual movie, and of course the stars of the movie, the actors who are still relevant today. There's a lot of really great young actors in this movie, which gives it its own standing historically. So first thing is initial thoughts. Let's highlight Aman.
Yeah.
First, had you seen Twilight before?
I thought I did. I thought I saw this movie already.
It was Lord of the Rings. Oh, wait.
No. They got me again.
So easy to confuse.
It's always Lord of the Rings.
This was No Country for Old Men. It's the same.
Yeah, no, I assumed that I had seen this movie just because it was so culturally relevant and big at the time it came out. And
I thought you might have had a date, an early date to the movie.
Yeah.
You are their age. You're a little bit younger than me and Bernard, so.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's generous of you to think I'd have a date at that point. I think I only started dating maybe a few years ago, but
a group date then.
Yeah, a group date. I definitely drove a bunch of people to the movie theater as they were cuddling and hooking up. But no, I guess I hadn't seen it. And what happened was I saw the second movie before I'd even seen the first movie. And I saw the second movie because the whole time I watched this movie, I went, when's the werewolf coming? Because I thought there was a wolf. And I didn't remember any of this movie at all because I hadn't seen it. But initial thoughts, it was, I think, I don't know. I felt like I was in a hospital bed watching this movie. Like, it's like a movie that would come on.
That is a unique metaphor. What does that mean?
It feels like it took me to a place of just all I can do is just sit and watch. Like I got nothing else going on. Like I just need to take care of my health and watch this movie. That's it. Like I'm sick. I got to figure this out. Whatever, it's on TV and I can't find the remote. Like I'm just gonna watch it.
Like a hospital, and the remotes never work in a hospital.
Right. No.
And the nurse turns on the TV and you're like, but I don't even want to watch TV. And you're stuck watching.
You're trapped. You're trapped watching this thing.
Family Feud for 3 days straight. Hey, shout out Steve Harvey. We love Steve Harvey here.
Oh yeah. You wish it was Family Feud at that point. It's like
wish it was. It's
a
like
court show.
It's
always in Spanish, something in Spanish. So no, it was enjoyable, but I'm not gonna poo-poo on it. It was great. It was an enjoyable movie. We'll get into it when we talk more.
Bernard.
For sure. So just love that metaphor. You never, it's really always a 50-50 shot with the hospital viewing. It could be something surprising. One of my favorite animated films of all time, Surf's Up. Definitely watched that on a similar sort of hospital trip. But anyways, Twilight. I enjoyed it. I'm gonna be honest with you. It came out at a time I think I was in my mid-20s or something like that.
Right.
Not very into the idea of watching this film at the time, and
For sure.
also where the culture was at that time, especially for young men in their 20s. But like, no, I watched it. I talked about it last week. I'm a big fan of vampire things in general, and
Yeah.
there's not a ton of vampire stuff in here, but some of the stuff that does show up, I was like, that's clever. That's kind of clever. You know what I mean? So overall, I enjoyed it. Clearly, I also am glad that I watched it because it is a big cultural moment. Kind of from what you were talking about, Aaron. So I had not really experienced that. So even like some of like the song choices that played, I was like, this was, yes, a big song at the time, or things like that. So and definitely 100% a marker of its era. Especially like one of Edward's sisters, she had like that feathered pixie cut. I was like, that's totally 2008 as fuck.
And it's interesting because we didn't get a lot of teen romps in the 2000s, late 2000s, because we got Twilight Saga, we got Hunger Games. These were the teen movies, so these are the time capsules. You go back and watch like 16 Candles. It's like, oh, that's what the 80s were like. You go back and watch like some 90s like Ben Stiller movies, or movies that kind of covered that era, Dazed and Confused, and some of the movies we've done. Even get to the 2000s, what were teens like? You got to watch Twilight.
Yeah.
So my thoughts on this movie, I really enjoyed it. And speaking of franchising, like it brought, so like categories of movies really hurts the perception and the reception of a movie like this. Like, yeah, I didn't see it at the time either. This was my first viewing, and like Bernard, like this movie wasn't marketed to me in any way. And the way that it's marketed, it is repellent to me at that age, at 24, 25, 26. Like, I'm a young Black man. Why would I want to see a young adult teens romance, white teens? It's not a
right.
Yeah.
There's two Black adults in the movie at different points, that do not.
In upstate Washington, the whitest region in the country.
There's a waitress who has one line, and then there's a Black vampire who does almost nothing.
Truly.
The homeboy from X-Men.
Oh yeah.
Edie Gathegi.
Yeah.
That's right. And he's shirtless. He's one of the few shirtless people. It's like
looking representing. Looks gonna be shirtless.
He does look great.
That.
He looks great in this movie for sure. He looks cool as a vampire too.
So there's nothing really. They're telling you in the marketing, like, there's nothing in this movie for you.
Yeah, for sure.
You, Aaron Covington. There's Bernard Harris.
Right.
Amon's a little younger, so they're like, man, if you got a little date that it might work, but
nah, it's nothing.
That's not what happened for him, but I'm sure that's what could have happened. Point being, this movie and the reception to it puts it in a box, but I think that franchising is different than movie making. It's hard to explain this, and I was really struggling with it when I finished the movie. I was like, how do I explain this? Because so few mediums have done this, but like maybe writing is the closest, in that, like, books, like the Twilight books hold a different place in the literary world than the Twilight movies hold in the movie world.
That's so interesting.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's like, so this movie comes out, and like, so again, I enjoyed the movie. I really enjoyed the world building, the franchise building, and the fantasy of it, not just the vampire fantasy of it, but the fantasy of a life, the metaphor of fantasies. of, and we'll get into that in a second. Let me finish this franchise rant, which is basically that, like, because it's made for young adults, because it's maybe kind of corny or cheesy in some ways, it gets derision from the general public. It also sparks a fandom among its core fans, like teenage girls, young girls, that harms the overall product and the people that make the product, right?
Can you explain that again?
Well, I did a YouTube dive. Almost all the actors, right, from the movie are like, what, I don't know what that was. You know, they've come around maybe 10 years later to being like having fond memories of it, but the memories from press at the time and from like immediately after, they're like, that was kind of hell on earth. They all kind of wanted to and tried to distance themselves from it because of the fandom.
Yeah.
Like, that fandom, any of these kind of fandoms can be really harmful to people. But at the same time, it's not just the fandom. It's like they all were like, it was hard to get work after this. Because we put it in this box to say it's not good, to say it's not worthy of advancement, to say, oh, it's just some teeny bopping thing, but real work went into this, you know, and these kids signed up to be actors and they became idols, and that is different. But if we place this as like some kind of franchising thing, which still don't think is quite figured out, and I haven't really figured out how to talk about it yet, it can be a different thing. We can appreciate it culturally for what it's trying and ultimately does do, instead of just trying to disregard young women's opinions, which is a whole patriarchal thing that maybe we won't get into, but it's the same thing when people talk about, like, you know, Taylor Swift, and it's like, well, you can talk trash about her music's not good, or that you don't like it, but she's moving needles all over the world. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
And I do think that even on a deeper level, young girls, they may say outwardly, oh, the character's so hot, or the romance, I like this, but they're also catching on to things individually and self-consciously that are societally important. Like these movies being mega hits and there's actors being mega hits after, like, that's something that you could say teen girls recognize when they watch it. If these people weren't stars after and the movies weren't as good, then it would be something else. But it's like, I think subconsciously they watch it and they like, oh, Robert Pattinson is a talent. They know that. But when it gets translated in like reports and stuff, they're just like, he's the new heartthrob. But they're kind of telling you more than that. They're saying, no, he's actually like that dude. And then 10 years later, we're like, man, Robert Pattinson's that dude.
Yeah.
Kristen Stewart is that girl, you know, and we know that now.
100%.
And I think they key in on this too. And if one of these actors hadn't been good, they would have replaced them. The outcry would have been huge, and they would have been like, that person is gone by the third movie, you know? This fandom doesn't play around. And all of these fandoms, they don't play around. You will get replaced if they're not feeling you and they're feeling everybody else. That's just my thought.
I think that's really interesting. There's a couple reactions I have to kind of some of the things that you're talking about. Like, first and foremost, you said, like, I think is, you know, these teen girls are recognizing this, but also they can say that they had agency over that, right? Like the hit of this being a book series, even before it's a film, is based off that fandom, right? And it's interesting to talk about like the fandom piece of it in general and the franchise piece of it in general, because, you know, obviously there's the Star Wars Ahsoka show coming out right now. So been deep in kind of Star Wars conversations myself, you know what I mean? Just because I'm into that stuff. And, you know, there's been 3 trilogies of films, right? The ones in the 70s for Star Wars, ones in the 70s, ones in the late 90s, early 2000s, and the ones that came out in the mid 2010s, right?
Right.
And in all cases, the star of those films suffered after career-wise. Mark Hamill, he couldn't get hired forever. Hayden Christensen couldn't get hired forever. And unfortunately, Daisy Ridley, like, you don't see her much right now. Right. So it is really interesting to think about how these franchises really do they're kind of harmful to careers. People, like you said, people sign up to be actors and they become you know, mega idols. And the last thing about that is like, it also takes me back to like, I think one of these things that happened in our youth, Aaron, which was Titanic, right?
Sure.
And people used to like try to hit Leonardo with that same thing, right? Like he's just a heartthrob. He's not a really actor, you know what I mean? But who would say that now?
Who
right?
would say that now?
Who
Kate
would say that
Winslet,
now?
what are we talking about?
You know what I'm saying?
They're
So
both the top like caliber of actors, you know.
for sure.
But we gotta be real about this, man.
Yeah, it feels like the classic, like, how do you break away from Disney if you started as like a child actor in Disney?
Totally.
Like it's the trap of people associate me so much with this role, and there's a fandom to it. That's the positive part. Is the fandom that people who are watching it love you and love you in this position, in this role. So they place they project onto these people who are talented and can do other things.
Yeah.
So it makes it all the more impressive when they do break away, like the Zendayas, like the Pattinsons, like everyone else who, I'm trying to think of someone from Harry Potter that broke away, but like, you know, even Robert Pattinson or
Daniel Radcliffe went and did his own thing. Like
Pattinson
a bunch of
was
weird
from
movies.
there.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Radcliffe did it. Yeah. And even Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt probably was stuck in that role for a while.
The
and
ultimate collaborator, Brad Pitt. He was like, hey,
the ultimate collaborator.
Get me with your best friends and we're gonna make some good movies, man.
Exactly.
It's interesting too to hear you talk about that, Amon, because like in some ways it corresponds to like what this movie's about, right? It really is about love that's on the verge of obsession, and like, is it healthy for anybody involved? And it's like, that's kind of what happens in these fandoms. Like people love you, yes, and they love you as that character, yes, but it's also so meaningful to them and such a big part of their lives that it can have this, you know, crossover into some really bad spaces. And, you know, as a person who's like a fan of comic books, Star Trek, Star Wars, like these nerd places, like those sorts of fandom conversations that are really kind of toxic are not foreign to me. It's always unfortunate to see, like, I could see it comes from love, but y'all lost the track somewhere along the way.
Yes, that happens so often, and it happens a lot. So I worked on we talked about it, but I worked on the new animated Superman show, My Adventures of Superman. And before the show had come out, when we were working on it and writing it, stills came out as like promotional stills of, oh, this is what the characters are going to look like. And
what a mistake.
Oh, what a mistake.
Right.
What a mistake. And it's happened everywhere. It happened with Star Wars when it was reboot, with The Force Awakens. Whenever that fandom turns into I expect my character to be this gender and be this race, and you have broken that, it totally becomes toxic. It's like, oh man, Jimmy can't be black. Like the amount of videos of Jimmy can't be black or Lois can't be half Asian. Like it's like, whoa, you haven't even seen what we've done. Right. But the 100%. Fear.
And you know, humans, I've been saying this recently, humans' fatal flaw is fanaticism. We're fanatics. That's embedded in everything, like historical. It's like this fanaticism, these cult figures, cult of personality, these organizations, you know, and our inability to think rationally about them, or especially from within them. And that's what celebrity culture is. It's a form of fanaticism. So that's the human disease. But anyway, let's get into this movie specifically for a little bit and talk.
And vampirism, also another rampant disease.
Yes. I mean, just the supernatural is a fanatical, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Through the history of humanity, of us creating these supernatural creatures to explain or to deal with our fears and explain phenomenon and all kind of things. And it's interesting where she took liberties with vampirism, which is something I had been thinking about with an idea I had. So I think it's fun to play with it. And even I think Interview played with it too. Like he literally called out, he was like, garlic's not a problem and this is, and he was like, but sunlight is. And in this movie, sunlight makes them like shimmer.
Like
Yeah.
diamonds.
Like diamonds. It's they become even more beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
which is such an interesting thing to do and to make it so that they can exist and go to this school for whatever reason. 100, 300-year-old people need to be in high school, but that
Yeah.
notwithstanding, they have their cover, right? They have to have a cover, so that's okay.
Right. Yeah.
They can't
Yeah.
just be living in seclusion in this nice house, arising questions about how they live. So they go to school and they live,
Mm-hmm.
they try to live like normal people.
Yeah. So much of the emotional like elements and the romance, like leaning into the tropes of everything, bypasses the logic of anything. You're like, okay, whatever. I want to buy in. I want to buy in. They're going to high school. Okay, cool. But when he shows like his place and there's just a million high school diplomas on the wall,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, what? Wait, huh? What's the logic on that? How?
Why did you save any of these, dog?
What was that?
Yeah, she needed another a joke writer to come in and be like, you really like high school, huh?
Right.
But you could just say you're 21 years old. You don't have to be
Literally could.
consistently in high school.
You could say you're 18, 6 months older than you say you are, and no one would question a thing.
Man, being a vampire has to be exhausting because at least once a decade, you have to move.
Right.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Otherwise, people are like, you just have an age, especially since they're white, so they really have an age and it's really glaring. They're not, they don't have the melanin protection.
Yeah. In this era, they'd be like, what's your skincare routine?
Right.
Like, how have you not have you not had a wrinkle in 17 years?
Right. Which South Korean skin products are you using and where can I order them from?
Yeah. 100%. Now it must be exhausting. I thought about that. I was thinking about it. Hypothetically, what age would you want to be frozen at forever and try to survive in a society?
It's got to be like early 30s, like 35 maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, 35 to 50 is somewhere where you could be for a long time without people. Somewhere in that range, I don't know. Yeah, maybe a strong 42.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. You're right. You got to be on the older end because
So you're just an adult in town, and then you can also be a little reclusive. Because as a kid, you kind of have to. If the kid stays in the time, it stays in all the time, it raises questions. If an adult does, you're just like likes to be by himself.
yeah, that's totally fine.
For sure. For sure. You get your hair cut a different way every couple of years and nobody's really paying attention. You know what I mean? Like,
you get season tickets to the baseball team and you're just like, for 15 years, you're like, I'm always at the Dodger game. And then you don't show up and people are like, he must have died.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have missed the home game. The star player's retirement, he wouldn't have missed that. He must have died.
He must have died. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm enjoying 40 a lot. So I think this would probably be it where like, I'm like, I'm good with 40. I think, and to your point, Aaron, I think like this, like that anywhere in that like 40-ish, like 35 to 50 range, like you said, 40, 42, that is a good age where like people are just probably going to leave you alone. Right. Like, cause you're grown up, you clearly got you got yourself handled, but also I'm a grown up too. I got to handle my life. So I'm going to leave it to you to handle yourself. I'm not going to pay too much interest to what's going on. If I see a 17-year-old kid just walking around town, I'm buddy, where are your parents? I never see you with
hey there, young whippersnapper. What are you, 17? Get over here. Yeah. Where's your truancy officer?
Exactly. But also, back to the vampire thing and just playing with the mythology, I really thought it was clever how like when he's like explaining like everything about me, my appearance, my smell, my sparkle, it's all designed to lure you in. Like I'm evolved to kill. And I was like, that is a really intelligent, like little tweak or just addition.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To like vampires. And also why it's Robert Pattinson, right? Why is he so attractive? It's because of this supernatural reason.
For him to lure you in so he can suck your blood.
Right.
17-year-old Bella Swan arrives in Forks, Washington, a town of 3,000 total people. Because her parents split, or her mom started dating this minor league baseball player, so she's traveling. So Bella lives with her dad from Arizona, is now in Washington. And it's very important that she was from a sunny place, and now she's in Washington, which is always gloomy and rainy and awful. She goes to the high school, and all the kids are nice to her. What?
Yeah.
Where they do that at? Not only that, it's a huge high school. There's only 3,000 people in town. The high school looks like LA, Fairfax High over here in the central LA.
Yeah.
33% of the population is age 14 to 18 in that time.
They got to be paying kids to go to high school to keep that town afloat. Like,
truly.
My town had like 20, 25,000 growing up. We had 350 in my graduating class, approximately.
Oh, wow. Right.
So a town of 3,000 is going to have like 30.
Right.
Yeah.
30 kids in a graduating class.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless it's the one high school in the 100-mile radius. You know what I mean? Like all the little towns send their people into this high school.
Right. 6 counties over.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
It's like a prep school that does 6 through 12. So kids from all over the tri-state area are coming in.
Truly. It's a lot of people.
Forks, I live in Spoons, 30 miles north. I have to get up at 4 a.m. to get to the only school in the area.
Right.
And how in a town like this small has this like reclusive family, the Cullens, the vampire family, is also insane. It's insane. You're a town that small, everybody knows everybody's up to everybody else's draws. Like
Yeah, you have to know what's going on. You have nothing else to talk about.
There's nothing else going on. You don't have some nice glass house in the woods that nobody knows about. It's like, oh, if this were meant to be more accurate, and we're just making jokes, like it's not a bad thing because it sets a tone for the movie, and it's meant to be every high school USA, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you were in that town and that family was like that, you would walk in and be like, oh, that's the vampires.
Right.
Yeah, they stay up north. They just, drink animal blood. They don't really mess with nobody. You gotta don't get them mad at you, but
right.
Yeah, that's the vampires. And then Taylor Lautner would come in and be like, oh, that's the werewolves. That's the native werewolf people. Yeah. They beef, but they haven't fought in like 50 years. So it's cool.
Yeah.
Welcome to
my granddad told me about it, but it's been perfectly fine ever since.
Just don't cross, Pickett Street. That's where like everybody just stays away from there, But and don't wear red or something like that.
Right.
Last thing, on a full moon, like just rent some videos, bro. We got a big calendar at the main diner that lets everybody know when the full moon is, so nobody messes with werewolves or vampires. It's crazy.
You can download a PDF on the community Facebook page. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. All the rules.
We just stay inside. We all go to the church and have a fish fry. Just trust me.
Yeah. No, I mean it's a town surrounded by woods. I'm sure they're like, all right, it's crazy. It's crazy stuff happening over here. At night, you're gonna hear wild sounds.
Yeah.
The least of which is like a vampire. Like,
Right. They keep us safe from all of the serial killers here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. It's really cool because they protect us. Yeah. Bigfoot, he don't be tripping because of the vampire. So the structure of this movie is crazy. It's crazy.
It really is.
There are some murders happening in the town, or a murder happens. And Bella's dad is a police chief. So he's kind of investigating, and they kind of lead you down this road where you're like, about to be a murder mystery, but the vampires are the murderers, or they're gonna stop the murderer. Oh, irrelevant. What happens is she's at the high school. She becomes enamored with Edward Cullen, and everybody kind of is, but he takes a liking to her because for some reason he can't read her mind like he can everybody else. She smells different. She's more attractive. And I'm gonna jump ahead because what happens is through series of random conversations, she starts searching and she's like, he's a vampire. She realizes because somebody loses control of their car at school and he runs to save her and just puts his hand up and stops the car. A superhuman feat of strength. And she's like, what was that? He was like, it was nothing. Just gaslighting the crap out of her. It was nothing. You didn't see anything.
Right in her face.
And then later she's like, you need to explain that. And he's like, even if I did, you wouldn't believe it. And also, nobody would believe you. Just killing her. Just destroying her like argument. But he's so attracted to her, eventually he has to tell her he's a vampire. And this is about maybe 30, 40 minutes into the movie or so. The next 45 minutes are just them hanging out.
Yeah.
He shows her, like, she hops on his back and he runs with her on his back. He's super fast, shows her how fast he is. They're just hanging out in the woods, never quite kissing, never quite. They kiss one time when he shows up in her room unannounced. I've been watching you. It's so creepy.
Oh.
But it's also like this, not even high school, this human fantasy, I think, about being discovered. She was plucked from obscurity, discovered by somebody mysterious. And as she unravels the mysteriousness, it's one, adventurous, something nobody else is going to experience or has ever done. Two, it's very hot and chaste.
So hot, chaste.
You know? And
so
three, it opens up a world of like extravagance and luxury that you couldn't even imagine. It feeds into this human desire of being discovered, which is what Hollywood is, which is what even people at work are like hoping to be discovered by like the right customer or by their boss to notice them, to be noticed.
Yeah.
By the quote, something elite, you know?
It's what gambling and lottery tickets. It's everything.
It's the same thing. So you can see how this like plays on human psychology. And this franchise, but all franchises kind of do this. That's why there's so many. That's how you can excuse so many jumps and logics in a way that I would say a movie you wouldn't, but in a franchise you can. At first I was going to say it's kind of like a cartoon, but it's kind of in the same world of like a certain kind of fairy tale fantasy. Then she introduces him to her parents. Of course, there's his family of vampires. Of course, there's one that doesn't like her and is snooty about it. Then they go play baseball, which is vampire baseball is amazing.
It is
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah, that was dope. Yeah.
Fast paced, just nothing but home runs and saves at home plate.
Right.
They got to play during a thunderstorm because the sound of them hitting the bat and the ball sounds like lightning. Just bang. That's why they had to cover it up and play during the storm.
He did say like we can only play when the storm, but I didn't catch why.
Oh, they were hitting that bad boy, man.
They were knocking the socks off that ball for sure.
Ooh, the power.
I also love like he said, like Edward said, he was turned in like 1918 from the Spanish flu or whatever, and it seems like they all kind of were turned around that time because like the way he described it, like his father turned them all. It sounded like around that time.
Yeah.
And I just love the like little detail that they're all wearing like early 20th century baseball caps. Like,
oh, nice.
You know what I mean? Like they're not wearing 70s or even 2000s style like baseball caps. They're wearing like the little short brim with the pinstripes. You know?
Stephanie Meyer must love baseball because the new stepdad is almost a pro baseball player, and then they play.
Yeah.
And that's like a 20 minutes. Like, it's not a short montage. They're playing baseball, fam. It's like 10 minutes of the movie. And then 3 random vampires come up out of nowhere. We have not seen them before, but pretty much they're responsible for the murder that her father is investigating. So anyway, they pop up out of nowhere during the game, interrupt the game, which is rude.
Super.
Yeah, very rude.
What? And then they basically threaten them. One of them, James, smells Bella, and he's like, I must have her. So that sets up the conflict for the end of the movie. He stalks Bella, traps her. Well, first she drives to Arizona from Washington in like a couple hours.
Very quickly. Yeah,
it's like
a
2.5 day drive without stopping. Like, let's come on, man. But she gets to Arizona really quick. She just leaves her dad and like because the vampires are like, these guys are dangerous. We have to get you out of here, and we'll hunt the vampires. But he follows her to Arizona. The vampires just run there in a couple hours. It's not a far trip. This part was just funny to me, just the logic of how fast they got to Arizona. I could not get over it.
There's some funny business happening with like the editing and the time management in that part. Because I definitely was like, what's happening here? Did this happen before this part, or like, you know what I mean? Like, how did he get there so fast?
Yeah, and also, why did they have to separate? Why did Bella have to separate from Edward in that moment? Why couldn't he drive her to Arizona?
It was basically like witness protection. They were getting her out of there, and they were gonna hunt the bad vampire.
Right, but
they tried to throw him off the scent.
That's right.
Then he caught on, and he was like, "Oh, she's not here." And that's when he went. He found out. He went to the school, got her records, and found out she was in Arizona.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering why they sent 2 other vampires to drive Bella instead of just, why not Edgar or Edward? Just let Edward drive her. Because unless Edward's the best.
Yeah, he was trying to be the hero and like the strongest.
Okay.
To vanquish her enemy. I don't disagree with you in the logic that he should have just stayed with her.
Yeah, but it makes for, I get why they did it in terms of dramatically, why it makes for a better moment for him to just show up and save her in the end. I
do not wish his name was Edgar. That's a separate thing. Altogether. No. I'm on.
Edgar would have been.
Edgar. I mean, come on. I feel like just as many cats in 1901 were named.
It must have been
as Edward. You know what I mean? As a guy with like a very old name, I feel like that would.
Fair. Yeah. That would have worked.
So he follows her there, and she hides it. He takes her to some ballet studios, kind of convoluted. It didn't really matter. It's just like a place that she knew as a kid. He like bites her, but then Edward shows up. They fight for a good 45 seconds. It's not that dramatic of a fight.
No.
They just kind of fly around the dance studio. He like, and then he defeats them. The other vampires show up and they basically kill him. Edward and Bella have their moment. And that's pretty much the end. We get back to the school and they go to the prom together, so they have this real romantic moment together, which just fits the movie and the future of the franchise. We see that Taylor doesn't like Edward. We really get that like nailed home here at the end of the movie, and we see that the vampire that they killed, his girlfriend, is still alive, and she's like, "I'm gonna get revenge." So that's basically like the plot, the structure of the movie, which is just funny because the villain and the whole murder thing, like, kind of, it's just like such a small piece of the movie that you think you're gonna follow, and then you don't follow it at all.
Totally. Like they throw a couple of like little nuggets up front of like a couple of murders in the town. And then, then the baseball game happens and those 3 vampires show up. And then it's like, wait a minute, these people are actually the villains. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it is a very odd structure, right? Like I've already said I enjoy the movie, and clearly it's a major hit. So it's not really a criticism as much, but very odd structure that, like, first and foremost, the baseball game is the thing that this whole movie like turns on. Like all of a sudden the baseball game happens and then we're in the like home stretch of like the villain hunting her. And then like also just kind of like, you know, as you're describing it, I guess, you know, it really does do a good job, however, of centering Edward and Bella, because like, yeah, that fight at the
Completely.
end is not super dynamic, although some of the like floorboards being destroyed by them like falling and jumping around was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But like that bad guy James gets killed so fast, and then like he's being like torn apart and burned by the other Cullens, right? But
Yeah.
like the camera really stays on Bella's perspective. Like she only sees that
Her watching.
blurrily, you know what I mean, over Edward's shoulder. So like, yeah, a lot of the moments that would have been like big action set pieces in something else were like intentionally focused on what's happening between Edward and Bella right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, this movie stayed on message the whole time.
Yeah.
And like the main villain, the obstacle in this movie was their love. The obstacles to their love, like him being a vampire, obviously is, you can't be with a vampire, and her having to understand that and realizing that this is her destiny. Like that is what this movie is about. And it's about this forbidden love for both of them and the implications of that. And it's about her finding her family. It's very much like, you know, the ultimate movie about like somebody's journey is like The Matrix or even Star Wars, right? Where it's like one character is in a world, he knows something isn't right, and he joins a new world. You know, Neo got unplugged from the Matrix. Luke Skywalker realizes that he should be in the fight. He's a Jedi. She realizes that she should be with these vampires. She's in a world, it doesn't fit. She, you know, she's not really close with her parents, and she's in this new school. Something's not right, but something is right, and that's Edward Cullen.
It's funny because like the description that I read, like when I watched it, right, the little blurb on the streaming service said like troubled teenager Bella Swan, and I was like, is she that troubled? You know what I mean? I guess I'm a child of divorce, so I was like, you know, is this really all that bad? But like, you know, because her parents are split, but also I remember being a teenager during that time, so it probably did seem a lot better, worse to me at that time. But anyways, her parents are split, and she's a little like morbid, but it doesn't seem like she's super troubled. But movie,
she doesn't dance.
She does not dance. First off,
it's huge when they finally like sway together at the end, because the whole movie she says multiple times, "I can't dance. I don't dance."
So that's so interesting. I was building to another point, but I kind of want to talk about this now, right? We talked about it being very hot and chaste. I know Stephanie Meyer, the author, is like, you know, very Christian. I think she's LDS, and this is no
Latter-day Saints,
Mormon, and this is definitely nothing against that, right? I'm not criticizing them, but she's actively a member, or at least the last time I read anything about it. So it is really interesting, and I've heard friends in the past like explain this movie to me when I had not seen it yet. And like the metaphor for like chasteness, like no drinking, no dancing, you know what I mean? They like the whole thing with Edward's obsession with her is just a teen boy who wants to have sex with his girlfriend, but can't. You know what I mean? Like the metaphor, the metaphor
movie,
there.
Excuse my French, but this movie is so horny.
It's so horny, you know what I mean?
Everybody's horny for Edward at the school, pretty much.
Yep.
And then when she comes in, every guy, and even some of the girls, are pretty horny for her.
For sure.
Right.
It is just oozing to this movie, and it's an interesting depiction of high school. You know, the kind of prevailing thought that high schoolers, that's all they think about.
Right. It's interesting too, like even the prom scene at the end, which you said like is a very sweet scene. They dance together. Everyone else at the prom disappears. Like the camera does a full 360, and like, the 100 people that had been there are certainly not there for their magic moment. I love that. But like she's saying at that point, like, I want to be a vampire. Why didn't you let me turn? Right. And
yeah,
it's interesting. He's like, and he like even asked her like tonight, and they're at the prom, right? Like, are you sure you want this?
So
like,
this is like originally like this podcast. Like, what are the cultural messages? Well, one is that if we keep, I mean, high schoolers you're developing sexually. That's
You're gonna have sex. It's gonna
that's a
suck.
part of life. But if we keep telling high schoolers how horny they gotta be in high school, oh my God. And then
My God.
the message of prom too is like prom is where it happens.
It happens.
That
Are you
message is so
sure?
drilled in every high school movie since like the late 70s of like, gotta have sex at prom night. Prom night is where it happens. It's like, my God, man, can we get off it a little bit?
He even says prom is a rite of passage. He says that. That's a line from the
that's
movie.
right.
You know what I mean? It's like, is it though? I don't know.
Yeah. And he's like the ultimate F boy, right? Because he's like, I've been to a million of these, right? You know what I mean? It's a rite of passage for you.
My goodness, man.
It's what he is.
All those degrees, they're trophies. He's got literal trophies of prom nights past
on his wall. And he's like, so you gotta, I don't know. I don't know if you want to be on it. You know what I mean?
Yes. It's so much teasing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
True.
So it's funny that you talk about, him being the ultimate F boy. I remember at the time it being part of like the discussion around the books and the movies, like how abusive the relationship between Edward and Bella is. And it really is in a lot of ways. Like, first and foremost, the gaslighting is real.
Yeah.
The creep factor is crazy. I wish I had a counter going of how many times I said, bro, what in this movie? Like,
right.
So many, like all those other dudes who are horny for her in school, like they're all saying incredible things. I'm like, bro, what? Like, what's up?
He's nagging her.
Yeah, he's totally negging her, like, oh, you got to stay away from me, but I can't stay away from you. You know what I mean? Like,
but it does play into this fantasy of like a certain kind of banter and a certain kind of like hard to get. You know what I mean? Like, these things may be bad, just generally like bad when we look at them. Not even looking at them now, even back in the day, people wrote about this. The criticism was alive. But in practice, in people's real life, like, the reason these things are bad is because people keep going for them, and people will, because there's like a human element of like how you respond and stuff, and how you're gonna like take things, and especially if you're attracted to somebody or have
the big part.
Have a draw to them, then the two of you might not even be that nice to each other, but still be, especially when you're young, together, because you're human sometimes. Not even like your child trauma or you don't know this or that. Sometimes you're just human. But there's a couple other things I wanted to bring up. These franchise movies actually make me think franchises are the new studio system from like the 60s or 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Like in the studio system, now movies take longer to get made now and these special effects make them bigger, but like, it's like, oh, you did Twilight 1, you're gonna do 2, 3, 4, 5, right? You do the whole thing. Back then it was like, oh, you did a gangster movie in 45, I'm gonna do 2 or 3 gangster movies a year until that's not profitable.
Right.
We got you signed for 10 years. So,
and when you watch those old movies, the like genre ones, like if you did a rom-com, you're gonna do 2 rom-coms a year. That's what you do. You're Doris Day, you're doing rom-com, musical rom-com. That's what you do. Those movies also had huge jumps in logics to fit the tropes and the fantasies that they want you to feel in the movie. Those aren't like, I mean, even Hitchcock was genre, but and even his movies have some jumps in logics. But like some of the great movies of those eras that are standalone films, they can feel more complete because a lot of the genre stuff is trying to get to the point. We're trying to get to the kiss. We're trying to get to the heist. We're trying to get to the monster.
Right.
Twilight, we're trying to get to the vampire fight. We're trying to get to them finally falling, completely being with each other. So they're going to have jumps in logics. And I think there's a really interesting parallel between the thinking of what the studio system was, where it was like, you're doing this is who you are. And you kind of do, and even a lot of those old actors talk about having to, as they got older, trying to break out of these molds that they were in, trying to be something else.
Right.
Same rhetoric that franchise stars have now.
Yeah. It's always been around.
And the franchises are done by big studios.
Yeah. And people go to these movies, they put their logic aside because they're like, I bought in. I know what I'm coming to see. Like I want to see this. This is same things on like Hallmark movies and everything else.
It's
Exactly.
kind of interesting because like just a couple of days ago, Chris Evans plays Captain America, was like quoted as like somebody brought up that Quentin Tarantino quote, like nowadays the movie stars aren't the stars, the characters are the stars or whatever. And Chris Evans agreed with it. I mean, I think in a less kind of snarky way than Quentin Tarantino said it, but he agreed with the statement. So that like made the rounds a little bit. But it is interesting to make that comparison because like even if the movie stars were the stars back then, were they really? Because like James Cagney, for example, is a great example of like that old studio system gangster movie. It's like, yeah, you might have been going to see James Cagney, but you weren't going to see James Cagney. You were going to see James Cagney play a James Cagney type character.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
James Cagney was not actually a gangster who was shooting people with Tommy guns every 2 seconds. Like, but that's what you wanted to see James Cagney do.
You weren't going to see John Wayne be a politician. You were going to see John Wayne shoot somebody, roam the prairie land. You know what I mean?
Right.
Be kind of a, the smart ass that he was. You weren't going to see John Wayne as in a do the Brad Pitt thing where he's meet
right.
Jack Black, and then
Right.
that's how the Rat Pack were movie stars, because you went to see them beat a Rat Pack. You saw Sinatra be Sinatra, not disappear in a character.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Nobody went to see John Wayne play Kublai Khan. That's a real thing. Look that up. Crazy, insane that it ever happened.
And last thing that really came to mind, maybe not last thing, but maybe last thing we'll get to is just that this being the age of the birth of franchise. And it's so skewered because of what Marvel and DC and how they exist. But and it makes sense on any timeline, but like from Lord of the Rings to these movies in 2008, also the era of Avatar, Last Airbender, Iron Man was 2008. So it's interesting because DC was actually behind, because they were finishing a Dark Knight trilogy, which is different than the franchising we're talking about. Because there had been movies and trilogies and things before Godfather. There was Superman had done 4 movies, but these franchises kind of speak to something different that DC tried to get into later once the Nolan trilogy was done. But the trilogies were like a dead end. These franchises never die. And then they'll be in other, and of course Batman existed in other things, but it wasn't tied to what Nolan did.
Right.
Hunger Games came in 2012. And I think that's really the birth, this era is the birth of like the modern I mean, it clearly is, but it's just interesting to me how it happened.
Yeah. Matrix is in there too, right? And I think
Matrix was a trilogy.
Ooh.
They didn't quite franchise Matrix out. I mean, they had a video game.
We've talked about this off camera a lot in our lives, Aaron, but yeah, they did not hit the Matrix the way it should have been hit as a franchise.
And Star Wars was in between.
Yeah.
They did a trilogy, then they did the prequel trilogy, and like, oh yeah, they're franchising, but it wasn't really until the new trilogy, well, actually maybe it was like Clone Wars, when it was like, oh, Star Wars is a different kind of franchise. And Clone Wars was around this time.
2000, yeah, the Clone Wars movie comes out in 2008,
2008.
I think. 2007 or 2008.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really interesting. It reminds me of like when we talked about Superman, right? Like the lead up to the blockbuster, right? Of like 77, you had Star Wars, 78, you had Superman, you had Jaws in 76. And it's like a very similar thing, right? The birth of the blockbuster franchise around this time. And definitely I would say, you bring up Hunger Games, which really ushered in, without a doubt, the whole young adult era of like the Maze Runner or the Divergent movies. Yeah. But I would say this is at the beginning of that too. Like this might be the granddaddy of all of the kind of young adult. Like
this really is a foremother.
Yeah, that's a better way to say it.
The thing with Matrix, because Matrix and Lord of the Rings were like the same era, basically.
Yeah.
But Matrix made one movie, then they made 2 others. The end of the first movie is an ending of a movie. it is open to sequels, but it wasn't guaranteed. Yeah. Then they made the next two, and they kind of straddled the line because they made them at the same time. Mm-hmm. When they made Lord of the Rings, they knew they were making more Lord of the Rings. It was never like questioning the world building of it. Right. It ended on a cliffhanger. Matrix did not end on a cliffhanger. It ended on the solution. He was the one, and he could change everything. So in your imagination, you're like, oh, he can fly now. He jumped into that guy. The war is over. They got their God. Right. The end of the first Lord of the Rings, they're like, oh, they're just starting this journey. It's going to be hard as crap. I got to see what happens. I got to come back.
Right. The Matrix 3 hours and it just started.
It just started. I need another 10 hours of this. And there's more to it. Maybe we'll do Matrix or Lord of the Rings again, or at some point, kind of digging more into franchising versus trilogies versus just movies.
Yeah, for this, and it's interesting. I think if I remember correctly, it's a trilogy book, but it's 4 movies, right? I think they split the last book into 2 movies or something like that.
For Lord of the Rings?
For this,
yeah. 5 movies.
Yeah, 5 movies.
5 movies, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe and the last one is a part 1 and last 2 are part 1 and part 2.
Which is interesting because that was something that around the same time the Harry Potter movies had done, which again may be if this is a foremother, that may be a forefather of this whole young adult thing. But Harry Potter had done that. They split the last book into 2. And then Hunger Games ended up doing that as well. They split the last book into 2 movies as well.
And the first Harry Potter. The other thing about Matrix is it was original. I mean, there's debate about that, but it was an original movie. It wasn't based on Lord of the Rings was based on a bunch of books. The fandom existed.
Yeah.
And they knew and anticipated what should come.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And that didn't really happen to Star Wars until Clone Wars. Until post the second trilogy. That's when they knew that they had to do more Star Wars. Like it was like, oh, we're gonna have to do more of this. Something. So they started doing the cartoons, which was then it became, and I'm using the word franchise, and that's like they're all franchise, everything, you know. Sure. So I'm using it in like a second definition that maybe there could be a different word for, you know.
It's really interesting. Yeah. Think about it too, because Avengers is 2012. So the birth of the Marvel universe really is in the middle of all this as well.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. This was a time where they were like, okay, we know extend, turn it into a series, turn it into a universe.
And IP, right? This is really that time when like double down on IP, to your point, right? No original stuff like the Matrix. We're going for something with an established IP fan base.
The first Harry Potter movie was 2001. So they were really ahead of it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And now there's like Harry Potter theme parks and Harry Potter everything. So it's like,
and there's been discussion, at least last year there was, of like this of Warner Brothers rebooting.
State?
Huh?
I said Harry Potter the State. They're gonna create a new state called Harry Potter.
But yeah, the Warner Brothers talked about rebooting the Harry Potter franchise, which I mean, it's been 20 years, but also like.
Yeah, it's like, come on, let some things be precious. But that's also because we experience the franchise in real time.
It does make me always think about like all of those 70s things that got rebooted in the 90s, and makes me realize now as an older person, like, oh, this is what people felt at the time. Like that just happened.
Yeah, that's so real. I remember watching episode 1 of Star Wars, like the second reboot, I guess, of the trilogy. And
Phantom Menace.
Phantom Menace. And I was going into that kind of blind. I don't think I had watched the initial Star Wars. At least I didn't have it in my memory. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that trilogy. But then I would come into contact with people who were like, this sucks. This is horrible. George Lucas should die. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Darth Maul looks badass. And he's got the double set. That's everything is cool about this.
Like, wasn't this a kids movie? No, it's a franchise.
It's a franchise that belongs to us forever.
It is interesting. I love getting into the franchise talk,
but I mean, I think as a franchise and the place in history which this movie has, I mean, it's pretty incredible. And I think also like what we already talked about as far as them having been, kind of nuclear for a while in the sense that they weren't getting touched for jobs. But like going back the indie route, both Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart going the indie route and just like slowly grinding out, like just getting their bona fides, right? To the point where they're starting to get award nominations. And then only a couple years later, after they're getting these award nominations, they're back to being Hollywood's darlings. You get Robert Pattinson, who's Batman now.
And
Yeah.
I was gonna say back into the franchise world.
Right.
Truly.
He needed a break though, for sure.
He's an adult franchise now. Dark Batman. Let's wrap it up, man. Did you guys cast? I actually did not. I gotta be honest. I did not do a casting on this.
I just did the main three. What about you, Bernard?
Yeah, I did a few. I'm not married to any of them, so I don't have to do all of them.
Let's hear it.
Castings, and then maybe I'll chime in with just some thoughts as we do it.
All right, you want to go first, Amon?
Yeah. Aaron, you can give the green light. You can give us the money or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be the exact.
All right. So starting with, I assume we start with Bella. She's the star of the show. So starting with Bella.
Do all of Mons, then we'll do all of Bernard's. That'll be
yeah.
A little quick.
Okay. Yeah, that works. For Bella, I was mostly thinking about range of acting, right? And there isn't that much, but she's doing a lot, but it's not that much. And I'm like, okay, the first person that came to mind was Michaela Cole. Let's throw her in there.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, she could rock that. Then I went to let's go Jacob. Jacob's like the innocent everything. I went with my boy Marcus Scribner from Grownish Blackish.
Grownish and Blackish, yeah.
Yeah, sweet boy, sweet guy, turned into a wolf. But he's got that dog in him, you know?
Got that dog in him.
Literally.
Always. And then I went with, for Edward, I was like, all right, it's got to be, I was struggling between two, but I think I'm going with Dave East from the Wu-Tang series. He's just a badass. I want to see.
Pick, man.
Yeah, man. If a real vampire would have tattoos at that point, man. He's lived a life. I want to see everything.
Right. He was a steamship sailor back in 1923.
Yeah, exactly.
As an exec with that casting, man, the budget has dropped considerably.
Come on.
It almost raised with Michaela. Like I was like, okay, yeah.
Oh wow.
She may be past the point of doing a movie, like a young adult franchise. Like she's legit, she's established.
True.
But I don't know if Dave East is gonna bring. It's not gonna hit the young adults. Like they're not gonna.
I lost you on Dave.
Over
okay.
Dave.
Well, I had a second option, but my second option was Damson Idris. It's just
okay. Now your budget's back up.
Hey, there we go. Let the Snowfall boy.
Lori Harvey, his Snowfall. People love how Snowfall ended. So okay, you're back up.
Another Brit, another
Brit. Throw him in there.
Yeah, people love a black Brit, so we
for sure
love him.
All right, cool. So I tried to stick to my usual thing, which is to try to cast within the era that it was made, which is really difficult for 2008, especially with young black actors. You and I have talked about this before, Aaron, and I think you guys have probably talked about it on the pod too, but like post 90s, there is a real like slowdown of new black actors being introduced. You know what I mean? You have your Sam Jackson, your Denzel, all these guys in the 90s, but then you don't really have much, especially in that 2000s era. There's a real like dead zone kind of. But anyways, so I did that, and let's go ahead and start with Bella. I went with Camille Winbush. She
Bernie
was
from Bernie Mac.
From Bernie Mac. You're right.
Oh,
Vanessa, I believe was her character's name in Bernie Mac.
Okay. Yeah. Kind of like what Twilight did. We're picking people that are like little known. Like we're not going Amon went big, which is which we also respect. But yeah, kind of some sitcom people. Okay, I like that because I always liked her on Burning Man.
For sure, she would have been about 17 in 2008, so I felt like, that would have been good. But you would not have allowed to have her on set for a full day's work because she would have still been a minor. So it's gonna some budgetary. You'll let me know, Aaron, if I'm greenlit or not.
Yeah, that's a unit production manager's job, not mine. We'll figure that out.
Perfect.
Evan Ross, just to bring up that ATL piece, and that was kind of why I thought about ATL. So I went Evan Ross.
Short. He's a little short.
He's a little short.
But that doesn't mean we can't work with that.
He's a cutie though. Come on.
and the lineage,
and the lineage for sure. Jacob, I went Mike B. I mean,
young Mike B.
Young Mike B. 2008. He's not.
That's perfect.
He's not leading man right now, but he can definitely show up in the later movies and show off the abs for sure.
People know him from his work as a teen and everything.
Right.
That's fantastic.
Let's see.
I might switch those two, but
I thought about that too.
We'll do chemistry tests and see how they
fair.
How it goes.
Let him read for both.
I definitely, it's funny, and there's another person that I'll name in a second who, like, the three of them were kind of interchangeable. For the vampire father, Carlisle, I went Michael Beach. Just a general fan. I think Soul Food.
He's been in other things. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
So Michael Beach, always been kind of a fan of his work.
The Barry Jenkins movie too. The second one.
Beale Street?
Or the third one, Beale Street.
Yeah, he's great in Beale Street. So James, the bad vampire, the villain. I went Aldous Hodge. And this is the one where I was just like, 2008, Aldous Hodge, Evan Ross, Mike B, like they could, any of them could play any of those three roles.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, you're 100% true.
For the bad vampire female, which is what I wrote. I can't remember her name, but I went with Kerry Washington.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, these are some heavy hitters.
Yeah.
All go on to have a great career.
Kind of early on. And then the last guy I did was the black vampire Laurent, and I'm just keeping him the same, Edie Gathegi.
Nice.
That's the homie now. Like, yo.
Mm-hmm.
So am I greenlit?
Yeah.
Oh, right away. All right.
Let's go back 15 years and make this movie, guys.
Make Black Twilight run parallel to Twilight. I've been saying this for the last year. Like, if it's a successful white thing, make a successful black thing of it.
Mm-hmm.
They do it in reverse all the time. So why we should be doing that? Like, I don't care what people say. Let's make a complete black version of it. It's like easy.
I think that falls into that thing that you and I have talked about before, Aaron, which is just like, make more movies, right? Especially those things that are like vampires, or especially if it's something like like a Dracula that's in the public domain. It should be one of those every 5 years.
This movie had a great, I 100% agree. And this movie had a great cast. Just a quick shout out to Anna Kendrick popping up as just like this annoying high school girl. And Justin Chon, who's in this movie and has had a good career. He's now directing things too. He's done some really good movies.
Dope.
As a director. So just check out Justin Chon, Anna Kendrick, of course, and Kellen Lutz is another one. This is just like a cast where like people are still working from this cast, kind of up and down.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
The mom is Bosch's wife in seasons 1 through 4. So
definitely peep that. I'm a huge Bosch fan, so yeah.
Yeah, we love Bosch over here.
You spoke about Justin Chon directing things, and that was one thing I kept forgetting to bring up this whole time we've been taping, which was Catherine Hardwicke, the director. I recognize her name. I know her work, or at least some of her work before this, but I guess I never realized that she directed this movie. I do know that there's I think a different director for some of the sequels.
She's the only woman to direct this franchise.
That's really interesting.
Oh, wow.
The other 4 movies were all directed by men.
It's really interesting. She did a lot of movies that are kind of in this realm of like, especially teenage girls. She did a movie 13, which was like kind of a big movie that introduced Evan Rachel Wood.
She most recently did Mafia Mama with Toni Collette, which we watched. Me and my partner watched at a hotel one night. You know, the hotels only have so many channels.
Yeah.
Silly movie, nonsensical, hilarious.
That's great.
Watch Mafia Mama. It's so ridiculous, but you'll enjoy
it was interesting. I saw like she started out in, I think, production design or set design or something like that. And so she was on like the set for a couple of people that we've already talked about. Like she worked for some Richard Linklater movies. I think David O. Russell, at least one other big name person. So it was just like a really interesting bit to like read a bit about her career. So I'll point people to her work. Lords of Dogtown is a kind of a great movie as well. So she's got a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing.
We're going to wrap it up now. I appreciate everybody for hanging out and listening to us. A fun time talking about the Twilight first movie. Maybe sometime we'll do another movie from the franchise. I am interested in how the franchise develops now.
Same.
Me too. I got to finish this. I got to see what happens.
I scanned through the Wikipedia pages just to kind of know. But, I mean, the books were widely popular before the movies came out. So everybody was going in knowing what was going to happen. So I feel like I'm on par. Don't judge me.
Don't come for him.
Don't come.
You don't even need to say you scanned the Wikipedia page. Just cut it out and be like, I read all the books.
Yeah, I read every word of every book. But anyway, like I said, like and subscribe, share if you can. Talk to us online if you find us, if you feel like it. Whatever else, have a good time. Have a good day. Have a good night. Good week. Enjoy some movies. Enjoy some good food. Call your parents. Tell somebody you love them.
Tell somebody you would be with them if only
they were a vampire. Live, laugh, love.
Yeah, live, laugh, love.
You don't want this, Aman. Last thing I'll say is, I mean, Taylor Lautner, man. One thing I do know about the sequels, he's got the short hair. Why would you ever take that wig off that guy? He looks
he hated
so.
The wig, but the wig was beautiful.
The wig was beautiful.
He should have dropped the wig, but grown his hair out. But you know, I feel for these people that acted in this movie, but I hope that they do have some distance and clarity from it now. See you guys next time. Black Guys on White Movies.
Good night and good luck.